You're listening to East of the Rockies, the Michigan Student Softball Podcast on WCBN Sports.
Well, Mr. Burns had done it, the power plant had won it, with Roger Clemens clucking all the while. Mike Scioscia's tragic illness made us smile, while Wade Boggs lay unconscious on the barroom tile. We're talking softball, from Maine to San Diego, talking softball. Mattingly and Canseco, Ken Griffey's grotesquely swollen jaw, Steve Sachs and his running with the law. We're talking Homer, Ozzie and the Straw.
As it's been said, East of the Rockies on WCBN Sports. I'm your host, Jeremy Parks, on the other side of the glass. My partner in crime at Michigan Softball Broadcasts, Morris Mo Fabry and Kevin Klein. Boys, this is a long time in the making. The official Michigan Student Podcast.
I don't think we're off to a good start. Morris gets a decorated introduction, and I just get, Kevin Klein.
With all due respect, Mo is normally the one with WCBN Sports. Kevin Klein is also a Michigan softball fanatic, but you're always with Big Ten Network student, you.
I don't see any problem with me getting preferential treatment.
I don't either.
I'll just put it out there. I'm happy to get preferential treatment from our de facto host, JP.
Kevin is restraining himself right now. For those of you who don't know, WCBN Sports is the official student voice of Michigan softball. We've wanted to do this podcast for a while, and here we are. We're going to do this all season long, looking for a Friday release every single week at this point. And the first one, what else can we do other than recap yesterday's media day that Morris and Kevin were both at and give a little bit of a season preview for these Michigan Wolverines as Team 40 heads into the 2017 season. So, Morris, Kevin, you both attended yesterday. It was a combination media day for both the baseball team and the softball team. Obviously, all we cared about was the softball. So if you both want to give maybe a quick hit recap of some of the stuff that went down yesterday, we've got a couple audio clips that we can get to and a few other important tidbits, but it was Coach Carol Hutchins and 4 of her seniors. So I'll let Morris take it away.
Well, first of all, shout out Papa John's. I got some free dinner out of the deal, a few slices of pizza, some breadsticks. The breadsticks were pretty filling. As for the whole reason we were there, it was great to see the team out there again.
It was not for the Papa John's.
It was not for the Pop. Well, if I had known Papa John's would have been there, maybe I would have been even more eager to go. But anyway, it was good to see the team there. Good to really feel like softball is around the corner. Hutch seemed to be in very good spirits. Banter back and forth with the people there before the presser started, and her wit is in mid-season form. I'll just say that much.
I think Mo hit it pretty on the point. I think looking at a player standpoint, you see the 4 seniors up there. That's Ramirez, Montemurano, Megan Betza, and Kelly Christner, and you look at the 4 leaders on the team in terms of experience, in terms of their ability, and these are the players that Michigan's going to rely on. I mean, we'll get into it later, but there's a lot of graduated talent, and these 4 seniors, along with some other very competent players as well, stay, and they're back, and that is going to be the core of the team.
I think that's kind of the theme this season with Team 40. I think the crop of seniors that's left now really have an opportunity to set the tone for everybody else that's going to still remain after this year. And it's got to be a year for, the elders of the team to step up and really teach some of these younger guns.
Yeah, it seemed to me like they really kind of understood their place in the program as far as carrying on the legacy that Carol Hutchins and the players who preceded them have built here at this program. I think that they're going to be great mentors to the young players coming in, and I think that, with someone like Kelly Christner, I think they've been very clear about the steps they need, the roles they need to assume on this new team, and what they need to do to get this team to its goal, which is, as Hutch said, win the Big Ten, contend for the College World Series.
Yeah, and I think the elephant in the room is, there's no Sierra Romero, there's no Kelsey Susala, but at the end of the day, they know that They've been coached up incredibly well by Carol Hutchins and the rest of the staff. They've been in the program for 4 years. They know how the ship is ran, and they're ready to take over, at the head of the crew. And I think everyone is ready to, for the challenges ahead.
And you mentioned no more Sierra Romero, no more Kelsey Susala. Another important piece is that center fielder, Sierra Lawrence, who was a mainstay out in the center outfield for the Wolverines for the last several seasons. But we'll go ahead and look now at what remains in the outfield. Main point being Kelly Christner, being able to be that anchor in the outfield with a lot of new freshmen. Mo, I think you were the one that talked to Kelly yesterday. What did she have to say? I think you asked her specifically about what it's going to be like bringing this new crop through into that outfield.
Well, she mentioned that there was going to have to be some sort of an adjustment as far as communication is concerned. She spent so much time with Sierra Lawrence and Kelsey Susal in the outfield that they had a read on each other. They had that chemistry that comes with years of experience, and so they were able to kind of feel out where each other's ranges were, whereas now she's going to have to maybe be a little more aggressive with Natalie Peters and whoever ends up in right field alongside her, she's going to have to be the leader in that outfield and kind of impart to them the communications that they'll need to develop throughout the season.
Absolutely, and I think one of the things that she mentioned too, I went back and listened to your interview with her yesterday. She continually mentioned the fact that she wants this season to be a fun last ride for these seniors, herself in particular, not letting the pressures of the game really get to you so much as ways that they might have in the past. And we're going to be very interested to see, I think, early on what kind of tone this team takes, because Michigan for the last several seasons has been a team where when we watch them and when we call their games, we see that chemistry, we see that love of the game, love of your teammates, and that's something that's really been a hallmark. It was 2 years ago, the entire team rallied around the mantra of pizza. Everything was pizza related. Every time there was a hit, there was some kind of action that went along with it. Every time there was a big play, everybody brought into the middle. And it's going to be interesting to see how that plays itself out this year with this team. Mo, any other thoughts on that?
Yeah, I think that's a salient point right there. And I overheard Kelly talking about this with Mark Snyder of, I think, the Free Press.
Yes.
He was a far better interviewer than I was because he actually knew what he was doing there.
Your
but
first
anyway,
interview yesterday, right?
Yeah, pretty much.
Yeah.
I've always been too shy to go up to the players, but I'm no longer a student, so I'm no longer accountable for the things I say. I had showered that day, wearing a button down, feeling pretty good about myself, so I was able to.
That's a big step up. For you.
I actually asked the first question during the presser, but anyway, it was a big step for me. But less about me, more about Kelly. She was talking about how she really needed to kind of loosen up at the plate. Talking about how there were some mechanical issues with her swing last year that caused a bit of a drop-off in production, things that she identified on the film, but also talked about how, her mental approach should be just going out there for one last ride and enjoying her last year with the program.
And I think another big thing for Christner is, we've touched on it a little bit, is that it seemed like she was pressing last year. Obviously, she alluded to it a little bit, but you see the numbers drop off from the breakout sophomore year, hitting almost 400. Last year, 313. So if she can regain that sophomore year form, the outfielder will be fine. Last year, it didn't really come into play that much because you look at her two counterparts in the outfield, and they were fantastic in Lawrence and Susala. But this year, she's going to have to be the leader in that outfield. She'll probably be slotted in center field, I imagine. Her defense and glove definitely suit her well for that position, but that'll be a big step for Kelly Christner if she can regain that sophomore year form.
Speaking of who will work with Christner in the outfield, here is Hutch Talk for the week with a quick bit from Coach Carol Hutchins yesterday in Media Day on who will be joining Kelly Christner in the outfield and who are some other players to watch for the Wolverines this season.
We certainly have liked Faith Canfield a lot, and she's been the leading candidate to become our new second baseman. I've been really impressed with Taylor Swearingen, who's I think had just a 180 turnaround from her sophomore year, and she's had a great off-season, preseason, as has Amanda Vargas. And those are two kids who have been waiting in the wings, and their role has really been to be the sub. And for us to have the kind of success that we aspire to, we need kids like that to step up and be a factor in our lineup, to be a factor on the field for us. And when I say be a factor, I mean produce.
And then she goes on to talk about Maddie Uden at the end. There's a little bit of an awkward pause there. I think, Morris, you mentioned a lot yesterday. There were some moments where you thought maybe it was just your time to ask a question. There was a little bit of hesitation at points, but all that Maddie Uden stuff came a little bit later in that sound bit. But some of the other players that she mentioned in there, Faith Canfield, somebody that saw a little bit of time last season. Taylor Swearingen was in that battle at third base for a little while last season. And it'll be interesting to see. One of the big things that Coach Carol Hutchins mentioned a lot yesterday was there's going to be a lot of fluctuating in this lineup early on as they kind of feel their way through it. So any thoughts on where some of these other players outside of, say, the freshman class will fall in, some players with a little bit of experience like a Canfield or a Swearingen?
Well, I think Canfield will for sure end up at second base. We saw her there a little bit last year when Abby Ramirez was out with the ankle injury and Romero slid over to shortstop. Canfield was in at second base. She also was a designated player a few games, and her bat can come alive. Ended the season at about 270, but you look at a player like that who can really develop and do a good offensive player, a good defensive player, and try to help that lineup out offensively. So I think that's a really key player is the development of Faith Canfield. And Amanda Vargas and Taylor Swearingen, the combination of those two, I don't know how much playing time they'll see, but I know for sure Vargas has some home run pop in that bat. I know a couple of those West Coast swings last year, she had some big home runs. And Taylor Swearingen, you have to trust Hutch on that one. If she came in a complete, believe the quote was complete 180, so maybe her junior campaign will see some offensive ability as well.
Yeah, the only reason I'm a little skeptical on the whole Swearingen thing is that, she definitely has plenty of talent. A couple of years ago, she was really competing with Lindsay Montemarano for that third base spot and even started plenty of games over her before Montemarano kind of overtook her later on in the season. But, now as it stands, there really is a glut of talent at the corner infield spots. Montemarano, I think, is an established starter at this point. She got a slow start to the season last year, but she came through time after time in clutch situations. She's got a really quick glove down at the hot corner. Going to be tough to displace there. And at first base, whenever Megan Betza is on the hill, it's going to be Tara Blanco there. And when Blanco is on the hill, Aiden Falk, Hutch mentioned that her natural position is first base. Her bat going to be tough to keep out of the lineup. So, I think Swearingen does, again, have the talent to establish herself as part of a Michigan lineup, but she is going to have to overtake some very stiff competition. And, it might be for the best. Iron sharpens iron.
And the one that Hutch really mentioned was first base for Swearingen as a spot where she might actually see some time if she is able to get some of those games over Aiden Falk and Tara Blanco.
That'd be very interesting. Sorry to interrupt, but it would be very interesting to see a lineup with Blanco in the circle, Swearingen at first base, and Falk either catching her as a designated player. That's maybe not the optimal defensive lineup, but that's squeezing in a lot of power into the lineup.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think I would really like to see just Aiden Falk at first base when Blanco's on the mound, because we saw it last year. Falk is a heck of a hitter, a left-handed bat that really just drives the ball to her power field, and that can try to regain some of the power that was lost this past year. You think of Lawrence, you think of Romero, who are basically every time they walk up into the batter's box, they're a home run in waiting. So I think Aiden Falk can really be an important player this year.
And that's something that I think is going to be really unique for everybody this season is the new look of the Wolverines team. I mean, we've already talked about a lot of different positions that are going to be changing, but I don't think it's really going to hit me personally as a fan of the team, as somebody that follows them a lot, until Morris and I get down to Florida next week and we see those first games and we see those new lineup cards. And that's going to be a very interesting first set of games to see, especially because there's 5 of them in a short time frame, how Hutch decides to throw that lineup around, how she decides to mix it up. And they're going to see a lot of different things from a good host of teams down in Tampa. But that's really what I'm looking most forward to, is how does Michigan replace all the lost talent, all the familiar household names, and who is going to become the new crop of Sierra Romero's, essentially.
And that's the thing. And I think the big key for Michigan this year is not going to be, hey, Faith Canfield, go be Sierra Romero. Hey, Natalie Peters, go be Kelsey Susab. That is not going to be a recipe for success. It has to be, this is going to be a different character of a team just because of the different types of players that are inserted into the lineup. It's going to take some time to find the chemistry that's going to eventually turn into winning games, and maybe it'll take a while, maybe it won't. It just depends on how everybody meshes together. But this team needs to have and will have a different identity than the 2016 squad.
I thought it was interesting when Carol Hutchins was asked about what the shape of the lineup will turn out to be. And it's something that echoed what we saw in the fall during their exhibition games against the likes of Michigan, the directional Michigan schools. A start of the lineup of Abby Ramirez followed by Natalie Peters. I think Ramirez, first of all, makes a really good leadoff hitter. Plenty of speed on the base pass. She's proven that she can hit for average. Not a lot of pop, but you don't need the kind of power that Sierra Lawrence had last year. That's more of a luxury than anything else. But following her up with Peters, these are the two players who are going to get the most at-bats in your lineup. And I personally liked having Sierra Romero as the 2 spot last year.
Oh, you did?
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
It was nice that to have the best player in the country hitting number 2 in the lineup. Plenty of drop-off from her to Peters, plenty of drop-off between Sierra Romero and anybody else. But
on paper so far, again, we haven't seen anything yet.
Of course. But
there is hope that she can hit the ball just as well.
I think I want, if I'm coaching the team, which obviously I'm not, but I'd like to see a better, more proven all-around hitter in that 2 spot, in a spot that's going to get more at-bats, going to get a chance to knock in the top of the lineup, going to get a chance to, maybe put some power early in the lineup.
And that's the thing is when you think about Ramirez and Peters, both of them are slap hitters. So it's just like when you have a lefty-heavy lineup or a righty-heavy lineup, a pitcher can kind of figure out how to pitch to a slap hitter. So it's not like Ramirez is leading off and then Peters is in the 7 or 8 spot. It's back-to-back, same style of hitters. The hitters, they both want to do the same thing, so the pitcher can attack them in relatively the same way. So I think it's just not enough table setting for the heart of the order in terms of Christner, Blanco, and Montemurano.
Yeah, right now I think Christner and Blanco are slated to be in that 3-4 spot, backing each other up. And that's fine. They're going to drive in a ton of runs that way. But I would love to see, Tara Blanco hit in that 2 spot because I think she is the best returning hitter on this team. She strikes fear into the heart of opposing pitchers. And the more at-bats for her, the better.
Or even if you want her to have RBI opportunities and just a few more at-bats, put her in the 3 spot. Then she's guaranteed that at-bat in the first inning, so there's no waiting around. Well, if they go 1, 2, 3, well, you have the best hitter in your lineup leading off the second inning with nobody on. And that just doesn't help anybody out.
And maybe put Christner in that 2 spot. She's got plenty of speed on the base paths. I think that with an improved approach at the plate, she can get on base plenty enough to justify, maybe moving Peters down in the lineup. Also, Lindsey Montemurano, maybe you could move her up from the 6 spot, which is likely where she'll hit, into that number 2 spot. She's great at getting on base. Not as much of a stolen base threat. And I know Hutch likes to have her teams run, but at the same time, I think she might fill that role a bit better than Peters. Obviously, got to hedge it all with it's just conjecture. We haven't seen this team play yet.
And another player that I'm kind of interested to see, I wouldn't expect this to happen early on in the season, but Hutch again yesterday was talking about the improvement in the bat of Alex Subcheck, somebody who saw limited time behind the plate last season, had a couple opportunities at the plate. Nothing really that wowed. I think she was somewhere around 260 in average with, a sample size of appearances at the plate. But she talked a lot again yesterday about the fact that bat has improved a lot. And with Subcheck looking to be maybe the majority lion's share catcher, it was mentioned between her and Katie Alexander. But I think if you're looking from a defensive standpoint, I like Alex Subcheck a little bit better from the defensive end and maybe even an offensive end over Katie Alexander. So if you're looking at a catcher who's going to have a lot of starts in that lineup, I wouldn't be surprised if maybe an Alex Subcheck could move up into that top 1-2 kind of positioning. I gets rid of the slap hitting problem that Kev has a little bit of an issue with, and if you've got another good bat, she can hit for power, she can hit for whatever she would like to, at least it seems so in her early appearances. that might be another situation with another batter who could put their name up there for that top of the order area.
Yeah, I mean, I think Michigan has, 5 or 6 bats in the lineup, the quality of what we can expect out of Alex Subject. And I think you might want a little more speed, a little more on-base ability, proven on-base ability in that 2-hole in an ideal lineup sort of context. But I do agree with you. I do think Subject's going to really seize this role behind the plate because she was the most impressive player in Michigan's fall showdown that I saw against Michigan State. Got robbed of a home run. She was spraying line drives all over the field. I think she's going to take a big leap forward.
Or the other thing is we're all just looking way too far into this, and we just have to trust Hutch.
I think at the end of the day, that's what has to
What
happen.
are we going to talk? What are we going to talk about if we can't?
I mean, there's a reason she's been this great for 33 years.
I mean, there's a reason we're here making a podcast, and that's solely for the purpose of conjecture and the fact that we love this team. Let's be honest. I mean, you, me, and Morris have been having this conversation about the lineup since October. I mean,
that's true.
Back in October, we started texting each other about what we thought this Michigan team was going to look like top to bottom, and we've been making our points all season long, and now maybe we have a little bit more light to shed on that conversation with some of the things we heard yesterday. But again, obviously we're not going to know much. We probably aren't even going to know a whole lot coming out of
So
Florida
what you're
next
saying
week.
is we've been thinking on this for a half year, and this is the best we got.
That's sports.
I mean, we haven't even touched that right field position, and who knows what's going to go into that one. I mean, talk about a kind of like a log jam of sophomores who aren't too experienced and a lot of freshmen that are talented but inexperienced as well. So that's another big question mark to see which direction Carol Hutchins goes.
I mean, this whole project has been something that we've been giddy about for a long time. So to actually have us all sitting down and recording and talking about what's going to happen this season, I think is the best we're going to do at the moment. And as we go throughout the season, every single Friday, we're going to have an opportunity to talk about, the week that just happened and the week ahead. But for right now, it's purely guessing. And I mean, there's a few things that we can pretty much surmise to be 100% going to happen, but
Megan Betza, that's 100%.
She's consistent.
But the interesting thing about Megan Betza, we go and look at what she talked about yesterday. She wants to be a different kind of pitcher this year as well. She mentioned specifically bringing her pitch count down, being a hefty strikeout pitcher. She burned that arm a lot last season, was a workhorse. And she talked about wanting to get ahead of hitters early, which seemingly she did in every at-bat, but there were always those prolonged at-bats that drove up her pitch count. She was really talking about focusing on knocking that down, and if that means maybe bringing in more of her off-speed stuff, because we knew when it was a 2-strike count, you could rely on Megan Betza to bring that heater, and she could blow most batters away with ease. But if she's going to reduce that pitch count, maybe she falls back on some of those breaking pitches and tries to get a few more looks and misses and tries to switch it up a little bit. But even in that position, somebody that is going to be fantastic in the circle all season long, it might look different.
Well, I mean, you look at the two pitchers that have been her counterparts the last 2 seasons. You think of Haley Wagner, you think of Sarah Driesinga, and both of those pitchers are, pitch to contact. Driesinga goes in there, won't give you a lot of strikeouts, but she'll get the job done. And maybe if Megan Betza can balance all the strikeouts with pitching to contact and picking her spots of what type of pitcher to be, maybe if there's 2 outs and there's a runner on third, you want to be that strikeout type and do it yourself. But if it's the bottom of the lineup coming up and the bases are empty, then you can be that contact pitcher. And if she can complement those 2 styles, which I have no doubts that she can because of her talent, then she can even take herself to the next level, which is pretty scary to think about considering where she is right now.
Yeah, the rotation for me was the biggest question mark heading into this season. Well, maybe tied with how do you replace the production of the departing seniors who were so good for this team. But it is a big question for me. Last year it was kind of taken for granted that Driesinga, back from injury, who was already pretty phenomenal in her first couple years, it was kind of a given that she would be that number 2 behind Megan Betza. The year before, I don't know exactly what Betza was established as before we started covering the team, but she and Wagner were a solid 1-2 punch throughout the entire season. This year, I think it's probably going to be Blanco getting a little more time in the circle than Leah Crockett. Her name was mentioned way more in the presser by Coach Hutchins. And Crockett and Blanco pretty much split time throughout the fall, so I don't think we can glean much from that. But yeah, I think that if anything, Betts is going to need to adapt her approach in the circle, need to pitch to contact, need to limit the pitch count, because if she can go more innings this year, if she can, take on a bigger workload, become the kind of workhorse that we see in, like Sarah Groenewegen at Minnesota, then that's just going to kind of mitigate any concerns about the rotation, because it's just, less uncertainty, less need for Blanco and Crockett to work out any issues.
Well, and another point is, if she can get that pitch count down, I think she realized it, and the coaching staff probably did as well. At the end of the year last year, going into the Big Ten tournament, going into the Women's College World Series, you could tell Megan Betza was a little banged up and she was a little worn down. Struggled a little bit against Minnesota in the Big Ten championship game, struggled a little bit in the Women's College World Series.
2 years in a row, really.
2 years in a row, and that is a function of just so many pitches and maybe a little bit of injuries in there as well. But I think it's finally, which is a really good thing, the self-realization saying, hey, I'm pretty good, but there's only so much I can do here, so why not conserve the pitches, get more outs with them, and then put less stress on the rest of the pitching staff going, down the stretch of the season.
Yeah, I don't think it's going to be like a major adjustment from, she's still going to strike out a ton of hitters and be as dominant as she's ever been, but I think that this is definitely a wise decision on her part and on the part of the coaching staff to adapt her approach in this way.
So we've kind of covered all the way around the field for the Wolverines at this point. Time will tell more about the actual team as it goes through, but let's take a quick opportunity. We're going to look a little bit at this early season schedule and then maybe a little bit about Big Ten conference play, and then we'll close out the season preview. So, Morris, you and I will be in Tampa next weekend for the opening series, and then the following weekend it's going to be Dalton Pataki and Leo Blavin in Raleigh for the Big Ten ACC Challenge. Kevin, I see you squinting your face. We'll get there. We'll get there.
I just need Lexington. That's mine.
Lexington will happen as well. I think really the only tournaments that we're not going to cover are the 2 California trips over spring break.
Morris, I don't know if you caught it yesterday, but when someone asked the question to Carol Hutchins saying, how do you decide where to go? And she mentioned, well, we try to take all the California kids home at least once in the season.
Pretty much. And I mean, I can't blame you. I'm excited to get to warm weather for a little while. It's getting dark and depressing and cold here again. But let's take a look just really quickly at the Wilson D. Marini tournament next week in Tampa. Hosts USF are coming off of their Conference USA championship last season, but really other than that, Florida is the other big contender in the tournament. I think that's the game that most Michigan fans will be looking forward to.
But not Hutch. According to her, no games are circled on her calendar.
They are all, for all she knows, they could be playing, I don't know.
As long as they're good teams. But yeah, she told me in no uncertain terms that.
I wish I had the soundbite cut a little bit more perfectly about the schedule.
It was a hard no.
It was hard and it was quick.
I just kind of had to smile with the biggest crap-eating grin on my face.
And then I was sitting next to Mo, and I kind of had to shield my face. I didn't want to be seen with him.
I thought it was hilarious.
It was funny in retrospect. I would be scared out of my pants. I think the only question I've ever asked in a post-game interview was I asked Jim Harbaugh at Penn State last year about his thoughts on the week of Bo's passing and him playing football every year. And I actually got a good answer, but the second I raised my hand was just shaking. It was terrible. And then another reporter behind me who I'd never seen before patted me on the shoulder and was like, "Good question, kid." And I was like, "Oh, yes."
I felt pretty comfortable though in Ray Fisher Stadium because Leah, I said he makes it easy on you because we already have a pretty good rapport with her, and
we've seen this team a lot too, which I think adds to the comfort level.
Yeah, and Coach Hutchins, for the fiery reputation that she has, is quite personable.
Yeah.
So while I was asking maybe some stupid questions and overstepping my bounds, I think it's something that I can work through.
So let's go ahead and take a look at this tournament, as we said. Really, that Saturday is the big day. We come in on Friday at 9:30 in the morning, the first game for Michigan in the tournament against the Delaware Blue Hens, and then play St. John's, the Red Storm, in the afternoon at 11:45 or late morning. Should be a fairly quick day there, I think. Not a whole lot to discuss. But Saturday's the big one. Florida's coming in the preseason rankings at tied for 4th, and Michigan is coming in at 6th overall in the early season rankings. So obviously, Florida has been an arch nemesis for Michigan for seasons on seasons with Tim Walton and the Gators down in Gainesville. continually causing headaches for Carol Hutchins and the Wolverines 2 years ago in the College World Series, last season, early in the season. There's been an early season Michigan-Florida matchup the last several seasons. Does this one play out any differently? Can Michigan come out of that Saturday morning game 3-0?
No.
Pretty unanimous.
We took a page out of Hutchins' book.
I think Michigan's getting shut out, and I don't mean to disrespect the coach or the lineup in any way, but it is going to be a lineup without much experience, and it's going to be running into the buzzsaw that is Alicia Ocasio and Delaney Gourley, the righty-lefty 1-2 punch. Both of them ERAs below .8 on the season last year, and that's playing in the SEC, one of the best softball conferences across the country, near their home field down in Tampa, Florida. It's going to be rough going. The only way I see them taking this is if Betza just goes insane.
If they win and then beat USF in the afternoon and it's 4-0 on Saturday afternoon, Morris, we're hitting the beach. We're getting, umbrella drinks and enjoying the sunset.
The thing with Florida that makes it extremely scary is I'm pretty sure Ocasio and Gurley are both juniors, right?
Yeah, I
believe so. Yes.
I think Gurley is a
I know
junior.
Ocasio is for sure.
Because when we saw her 2 years ago in the Women's College World Series,
Gurley is a senior for the record.
I mean, the pitching staff, for some reason, it always seems like Florida just has 2 or 3 or 4 just really good pitchers that can shut down a lineup. Even if you get to one, the other one will usually clean up the mess. So I don't see Michigan beating Florida. But I think the more important game is the USF game because USF comes in ranked 25th.
First time I think they've ever been ranked in preseason, or at least for the last many seasons, if I remember right. But
yeah, and I think that's a big game because that's a quality opponent that might be more of a toss-up game. So if the game can get together and get a win in that one, I think that will bring a lot of confidence for the team going forward.
But yeah, Florida, they were the number 1 team in the country before getting upset in their super regional last year. They lost, I think, 5 seniors, but none of them were really the top of the lineup, the 400 hitters. And, I do think that it will be a low-scoring affair. I don't think Florida returns a bunch of offense. I don't think their offense was that great last year to begin with, but with the people they're putting in the circle, going to be, if Michigan scrapes across 1 or 2 runs, it's going to have to be enough to win. Also, Ocasio, you guys remember how Lauren Hager kind of, wrecked Michigan in the College World Series?
On both sides of the ball.
Ocasio hit .433 last year and only 30 at-bats, so might be headed for more of the same stuff with her.
Well, coming out of that day, it could very well be 3-1, 2-2, maybe 4-0. But then
3-1 will be successful.
I think that would be pretty good. And then moving into Sunday, Illinois State, a team that I did a little reading on, and we'll have more on this next weekend. But it seems like Illinois State takes their team on like international tours every single year. I saw pictures of their team in Italy. I mean, it's
maybe
be a fun program
Maybe
to play.
Harbaugh
Exactly.
took a play out of their book.
Right. Okay, and then moving on to Raleigh the next weekend, Morris and I will be out. It'll be Dalton and Leo in North Carolina State and Notre Dame. I don't see a whole lot of resistance in Raleigh. I think it's a fun tournament. I'm more interested to see how Minnesota plays on the other half of the Big Ten offering, but we can talk more about Minnesota when I get to Big Ten. Do you see any problems going through Raleigh?
Notre Dame could be an issue. I mean, they're a top 25 team. I know Michigan beat them
handily.
Yes, last year. But still, I mean, it's another competent, tough opponent. It goes along with the mantra and the theme that Carol Hutchins likes scheduling good opponents rather than a bunch of cupcakes at the beginning of the year, which can only benefit the team later on.
Yeah, I agree with Kevin that we shouldn't necessarily take Notre Dame for granted. We don't have much of a clue of how this lineup is going to look without the Titans that they had in there last year. So, with the offense being a bit of a question mark, it's hard to know how the games play. You can't win games if you don't score runs. I think the pitching will be solid enough. We're going to see Betza in the big games, and I trust that Megan Betza is going to be one of the best pitchers, if not the best pitcher in the country this season. So Michigan's going to be competitive in every game that they play in these, early season tourneys, except maybe against Florida.
So I think I have a new podcast item that we can do from week to week. I'm going to call it a tournament based on a scale of 0 to 10 danger softballs. I'm going to go the opening tournament down in Tampa. I'm going to rate a 7.5 danger softballs out of 10. And then ACC Big Ten Challenge, I'm going to go around a 6 danger softballs.
We got to get a better name than danger
like
softballs.
See, that's just who we are, though.
Yeah, we're going to have to talk about that in the production meeting.
Yeah,
I mean, that has to be. Was that just a one-man decision on that one?
This is the royal
I kind of
we.
just thought of it, and I was like, danger softball sounds like I'm just going to roll with it, and I did. So let's just continue to roll with it, and then production meeting, we'll see if it comes back next week.
And fingers crossed it does not.
I'm not going to use the term danger softballs, and I object so strongly to your use of that term that I'm not going to give you a rating of these tournaments.
Insert deleted content here. Let's talk about Big Ten, guys. Big Ten outlook for this season. Actually, a lot of Big Ten teams getting votes. We know every year Michigan doesn't see all of the Big Ten teams really until the tournament. But if you look at it going down the list, Michigan coming in at 6. You go down and you look at Minnesota coming in at 16, pretty high up there. And then going down the list as well, you had Ohio State and Northwestern also getting votes, Northwestern getting 3 and Ohio State getting 2 in the coaches poll. So it might be a bit tougher a season for the Big Ten. Your thoughts?
Yeah, I think that Northwestern was kind of a thorn in the side of the Wolverines last year. Obviously, they had that big win in Alumni Field, the back and forth affair. But I think Northwestern also losing a lot of their senior leadership. Andrea Filler and Amy Letourneau were 2 huge contributors to that lineup, and as well as in the circle. So I feel like it's more Northwestern is coasting on their reputation last year than on what we can actually expect out of them production-wise. I don't expect them to be a huge threat in the Big Ten. Minnesota, on the other hand, Sarah Groenewagen is an absolute beast, and as long as she is on that team, and she might be on that team for the next 5 years, I expect Minnesota to threaten the Wolverines for the Big Ten crown.
I agree with the Minnesota assertion. I'll talk about a little bit about Ohio State because Alex Bain is back for her senior year. As she is absolutely dominant in terms of her bat from that right field position. Last year when Ohio State and Michigan matched up, you looked at those 2 number 2 hitters in each lineup, Alex Bain and Sierra Romero, and you were like, wow, these are 2 of the top 5 players in the Big Ten offensively, in my opinion. So she's back, Alex Bain. I know the loss of Maddie McIntyre, the captain of that infield, that shortstop, is a big loss. But with Bain in that lineup and a couple complementary pieces, Ohio State can do some damage. But at the end of the day, I think Michigan is still the team to beat, Morris and JP, in the Big Ten.
I'd have to have nothing but agreement there, especially with Groenewagen. I think I could rant and rave about her all day. Big Ten Player of the Year last year. ERA just above 2.03, hit somewhere around 300 last season too. So really a big danger threat. And then you look at a Sammy Mackin as well, helping anchor that Gophers lineup. But I kind of have that top crop of teams, the Michigan, the Minnesota, maybe just underneath them, Northwestern and Ohio State. And then really it's a middle pack of everybody else down to the bottom. I don't really see any big surprise teams. I think my biggest surprise maybe was Iowa finished last season in the Big Ten. I think they bring back a lot of good talent. Every year we seem to see Iowa. They have a good workhorse program. I wouldn't be surprised if maybe Iowa has a bit of an up year and finds themselves in the middle road in the Big Ten. But other than that, it's pretty much those 4 and everybody else.
I think that's kind of the generic terms we use to describe Iowa in every sport that
but
they
it's
have.
so true. It's crazy how Iowa just has like the real lunch pail kind of guys. And
It's
girls.
And it seems like every player, when you commit to Iowa, you get 7 years of eligibility.
That too.
Yeah,
Wow. Like look at Jake Rudock.
I mean,
before he got here.
We have to take a look at that athletic program because we need those 7 years of eligibility. We could have 3 more years of Sierra Romero.
They get a lot of hardship seasons, I think.
it's that mentality that just pervades the entire athletic program.
Them in Illinois.
Yeah, I guess. Maybe we just don't pay much attention to Illinois.
Well, I'm thinking specifically too of basketball. Like a week ago, Illinois had a guy play against Michigan who committed before President Obama took his oath of office in 2008. So
Yeah, maybe some investigation to begin. I am seriously worried about Minnesota challenging for the Big Ten crown. I think Michigan is probably the favorite, but I think that Minnesota has as good of a chance as they've had in the past few years, and I think it's an absolute travesty that these teams won't play each other during the regular season.
And the thing is, Minnesota only finished one game behind the Wolverines in the Big Ten standings last year. I mean, it's not like all of a sudden Minnesota came out of nowhere. They had a very, very good season, and if not for a few hiccups down the final stretch of the Big Ten play, I mean, Minnesota could have taken the Big Ten crown. So I think that's a very valid concern.
But it seems like Michigan always wins the regular season Big Ten title, but seemingly struggles again and again in terms of Big Ten championships. I mean, the only recent one being 2015, but this is a team that consistently is very good. I just think come tournament time, something just doesn't quite click. So that'll be interesting to see for the Wolverines. Morris, I remember you and I in state college this past year with, 14 straight hours at the ballpark until we finally finished that game that went into 7, 8, 9 innings and beyond. But
this year at Alumni Field, though.
This year at Alumni, we don't have to travel, which is nice. It was Columbus 2 years ago and State College last year, so we get to stay put. So I'll appreciate that.
Maybe the home field fans will help a little bit in the tournament.
Hopefully so. We're getting right to about the 45-minute mark, so let's go ahead and see if we have any final thoughts. As we go along with this podcast, I think we'll have to come up with like some segment names and stuff like that, but right now we really just want to get this first one, I think, under our feet. So
as you can tell by the danger softballs, we haven't put a ton of thought into it
the danger
yet.
softballs out of
No, Morris, don't put us in the same class as JP. JP hasn't put a lot of thought into that.
Yeah, we've got ideas.
We've been
on this side
solid
of
all
it.
day long. I mean,
Here we go. I'm going to borrow it from fellow WCBL alum Dalton Pataki. He calls it, what did you learn and what do you still want to know? So we'll go around and say one thing that you learned from today's podcast episode and another thing that you would still like to learn more about.
from today's podcast?
From today's pod. In relation to Michigan softball, obviously.
Oh yeah, you mean as opposed to all the other
As
facts
opposed to
that
like
we've
things I
taken
learned
in?
today, like I learned that a lot of people don't salt their sidewalks in Ann Arbor, as I slipped and fell twice on my way to class.
Well, I've already learned that from experience in the past, so I can't say that as far as today is concerned. I guess what I learned, I'll cheat and say what I learned from Media Day, and it's that I learned firsthand Carol Hutchins will not put up with my crap.
Okay.
I mean, that's again valid. A lot of valid points here on this podcast so
Right.
far.
We talk truth here.
One thing I learned a lot of things about the lineup, I guess. I mean, I think hashing it out here and listening to Media Day yesterday, there's going to be a lot of new faces in the lineup that are going to be relied upon, and it's going to be up to them to produce and to get the Wolverines back to the promised land.
I think in terms of what I learned today, I'm excited in terms of what I've heard from you both about attending Media Day yesterday, some of the things that were said. I'm particularly excited to see how Alex Subcheck does, how Matty Uden plays into the field, some of these younger players with less experience. Something I still want to know is how's this team going to – I think the question on everybody's mind, how's this team going to do this year? And we're excited to be along for the ride with you all. We hope you enjoyed the podcast. We'll be back again next Friday. Kev, you're going to be able to phone in. We have that technology now to make that podcast. Mo and I will be producing it live from Tampa. We're going to find like a margarita bar somewhere and do the episode 2 of East of the Rockies.
Well, maybe I'll make some homemade margaritas so I don't miss out on the party or something like that.
Live from Rick's.
Do you mind if
No
I
bad
say?
days.
Do you mind if I say the one thing that I'm still wanting to learn?
Absolutely.
I really want to learn what other bad softball references JP has.
Oh, Morris
as
and I
this-
have a lot.
I'm excited.
For
I'm
those
really
who are
excited.
regulars who just listen to this podcast, they know how bad it can get, and just brace yourself. It's
All right,
great.
let's make it bad.
All right, let's make it bad. That's going to be the new slogan of the podcast. You've been listening to East of the Rockies on WCBN Sports. For Kevin Klein, Morris Mofabry, I've been Jeremy Parks. We're going to leave you, as always, with a good night and a go blue.
Well, Mr. Burns had done it, the power plant had won it, with Roger Clemens clucking all the while. Mike Scioscia's tragic illness made us smile, while Wade Boggs lay unconscious on the barroom tile. We're talking softball.